So the big question is this: how do passionate golfers like you and I develop a stock shot day in and day out? A stock shot that's as reliable as the sun coming up in the morning. That's the question, and this podcast is the answer. Welcome to Stock Shot Secrets. Many times I am asked, Kyle, how do I practice and get better in the winter? Because I don't have like a fancy smancy golf room and like all those bays and the TrackMans and short game stuff. So how do you actually optimize your game in the winter so that when you come out in the spring and the summer, it's not feeling like you have cobwebs? And I completely agree, right? Like there's an art to knowing what you need to do and also having a plan so that when you're practicing, you're actually making most use of your time. And I had to do this a lot, right? Like at Seton Hall, we had a little tiny golf room that we would hit balls at. And like at the time, we had a net and it had a hole in it. So every time you'd hit, behind it, there was like a concrete wall. So like if you hit like a stock shot, you would hit through the hole and then have to like dodge the bullets of like the balls coming back every 20 balls and like hitting you in your face. That's a massive liability. But with that room, I had to essentially learn the art of like how to practice when there was like 12 inches of snow on the ground and you were just in this little room with a box, right? So the first and foremost thing that we need to understand is that in the winter time is actually the best time to get better. And what I mean by that is like, I am asked all the time, hey, Kyle, like, why don't you go teach in Florida in the winter? And like, why don't you go south to warmer weather? And I actually love the fact that in Ohio right now, right, like I got a sweater on, it's starting to get cold. And the fact is that when I'm recording this, which is in October, it gives the player like multiple months where they can only work on their motor pattern without having to actually worry about like the scores, right? So if you take it from like one of my favorite quotes of all time of Tiger Woods of understanding what you need to do to that, and then you need to make it look right, and then it starts to feel better, and then it starts to perform. In the winter time, what you can get obsessed with is making sure that your technical skills are on point so that when the spring happens, you can just go play golf and just kind of like have fun. You don't have to really think about your golf swing. So first and foremost, if you are working on your swing in this wintertime, right, we always want to have our practice following the formula, right, of program, block, random, compete. So programming, meaning you're rewriting the program every day, reminding us what it is that we are working on, right? So you're checking your fundamentals, you're using a mirror, you're checking like from down the line on your full swing, like is my left arm a little on top of my right? Is my ball position good? Is my posture good? So on and so forth, and then making some dry runs through a mirror, and that takes like 3 or 4 minutes. Then it's going into your block practice station. So whether you're hitting balls, like I'm a really big fan of like having a net, almost a net over a fancy smancy like simulator, because of the fact that with the net, you don't really even know what the ball is doing, right? And I think there's a lot of value in that because you can get obsessed with how your swing looks and making sure that technically it is correct. So in your net, one thing that you can do that's like what we done at like we have a net return at our house, which is where we hit balls, is you can basically put like right in front of you, you can put a piece of tape to basically signify what straight would be. And then you can put another piece of tape if you're a right-handed golfer, like a foot to the right. So then that creates a zone in which the ball flight, if the ball is starting in that, you would know the face angle is good because the face angle determines where the ball starts. Then if you have like your block practice stations, so like your noodles and your cones and all of that kind of stuff, then you know if you're missing the feedback station and the ball starts within that zone, now you know that your club path would be good and your face angle would be good, which is essentially what the golf swing is about, right? Like path and face, because that determines the curve of the ball. And then if you had something kind of like a little bit behind the ball, say like a magazine or a towel or something, and you were missing that magazine or towel, now you know your attack angle is good. And those are like the 3 main parameters that you're looking for, right? Like club path, face, and attack angle. So now when you're practicing in the winter, right? Like I would go down into your garage, into your net, right? And you would maybe have a mirror out there and you would do a little programming, just checking your stuff. Then you would set up your block practice station to where you're hitting in that block practice station for maybe 20, 30 minutes. And then after you do that, then go into trying to create some type of, you want to do a little bit of random, which obviously you can't do random if you're not outside and you don't have different targets, but you could hit different clubs. And what I would do here is I would really try to work on dialing in your tempo. So what I mean by one way that I would suggest doing that is, what if you went through your bag and you hit all 13 clubs, right? And you tried to hit all 13 clubs, imagining you were hitting them a certain distance. So say, okay, I'm going to start by hitting my lob wedge, and I'm going to hit every club, I'm going to hit 110 yards. So I'm going to take a lob wedge, and I'm going to hit that thing as hard as I can and get that thing to go 110. Then I'm going to go to my sand wedge, then to my gap wedge, then to my pitching wedge, then to my 9, then to my 8, my 7, so on and so forth, right? All the way to driver, to where you're hitting a full swing driver with a finish, right? Not like a little baby swing, with a full swing with your driver, just trying to carry it 110. This would allow you to work on your tempo and just kind of understanding your tempo ladder of like, where would you like to fall, which probably is going to be somewhere in that 75 to 80%, right? Then that's going to allow you to now continue to hone some skills of what you're doing. But then you've got your putting and chipping, right? Like we just had a player the other day who submitted a question into our Stock Shot live webinar that I did this past week. And one of the questions he asked is, he goes, how do you practice your chipping in the winter, right? And it's hard too, right? Because in the winter, you don't have grass. You don't have different greens and like different shots. But if you think about chipping at its essence, right, the first thing we need to make sure in chipping is we need to make sure that we have the proper setup, right, which we could do, once again, in our programming. Then the second thing, and this is really taken out of like some advice that Tom Lehman gave me, which I'll share here in a second. But the second advice, or the second piece to it, is we need to ensure that we have proper contact. The third piece we need to make sure is that we can basically hit different trajectories. And then the next piece would be that we can basically hit it the same distance every single time. And then after that would be situational awareness. Hey guys, I hope you are enjoying this episode of the Stock Shot Secrets podcast. If you are enjoying it, be sure to like this episode. Be sure to subscribe so you can always see when they're coming out. And most importantly, if you would be so kind to be able to share this podcast with other passionate golfers who are trying to get better and build stock shots, because it grows through you sharing it. Thank you so much for tuning in. And now back to Stock Shot Secrets. So I remember sitting in a Bible study with Tom Lehman back in Arizona. This is probably dating, maybe 2012 or so, 2015, 14? No, not 15, probably 2012. And I was really, really struggling with my short game. And I went to Tom Lehman, right? Like, here's the Ryder Cup captain, Hall of Famer, won a major championship, maybe 2 actually. What an amazing guy. And I was like, Tom, like, my chipping sucks, man. Like, what should I do? And he goes, well, Kyle, like, and he said the same thing I just told you. He goes, well, first, like, how's your setup? And I was like, it's good. And then he goes, the next thing, rather than like working on hitting different shots, you need to make sure that you're doing these things right? Like, can you go and hit 10 chips in a row off of a perfect lie and make perfect contact every single time? He's like, I would do that, which you can do as well, right? Like, if you can't make perfect contact in your living room off carpet or in a net in your garage, hitting it off grass, like, you don't have a prayer. So we need to first make sure that we can make perfect contact. So you would work on your chipping. You would go into the garage, make 10 perfect chips with perfect contact. From there, now, once you've done that, you need to make sure that you can hit 3 different trajectories 3 different times. So you're going to make perfect contact with a low shot, a medium shot, and then a high shot. And then a low shot, medium shot, high shot. Low shot, medium shot, high shot. And if you can do that 3 sets, so 9 shots with perfect contact, then you go, okay, I can control trajectory. And maybe you would make trajectory, you could use tape again and throw it across your net, so you're hitting like these little circles, right? Like maybe like little, like almost like little windows that you're trying to put the ball through, right? Then after you did that, now you need to make sure that you can manage your tempo to hit the same shot over and over and over and over and over and over again, just like shooting free throws, right? So that's where maybe what if you put a bucket out in front of you and you say, can I make perfect contact with the same trajectory and hit it the same distance every time? Because to do that, you have to have good tempo, right? And good contact and control trajectory. So now if you were a master at that, now when you go outside, you can just do situational awareness, right? Like what should I do in this slide? You don't have to worry about your technique because your technique would be really, really good from all the training that you have done in the winter. And now when you went outside, you would just be learning how to make the adaptations that you need based upon the course and the conditions, right? But you wouldn't be doing any of the technical work outside because the technical work was already done, right? And that's what happens a lot of times, right? Like players would be like, I need to get lessons outside. I'm like, why? He's like, because I need to see the ball fly. I'm like, why? Right? Like if we're getting a lesson, no offense, like we ultimately care about what the ball's doing, but first we need to take what Tiger Woods says, and we need to make your swing look right. So, which needs to be done in like the lab or the golf room, right? Because if you can't hit it good in the golf room, hitting it outside, you have no prayer, right? We have to be able to hit it good first in like a closed environment with no elements, perfect lies, no stress. And if you can hit it good there, then you go outside, right? And that's kind of interesting just how that whole dichotomy of indoor practice has changed over the last decade. I was just talking to someone the other day, and it's like indoor practice with simulators and all that kind of stuff, like that wasn't a thing like 8 years ago, 10 years ago, right? Like the golf room, I would say we almost were one of the first in the industry of like taking development and pulling it indoors to where like indoors is the place that you go to get better, and then you go outside to play, which is why at the golf room, like we're not real big, not say supporters, but like when people are indoors at the golf room and they're like playing indoor simulator golf, I'm like, why? Like, why don't you just practice? If you want to play golf, like go outside and play golf. Like I own 12 TrackMan, and if I'm playing golf, I'm not going to the golf room. I'm going outside to play. But I am going to the golf room to practice and like get better, which is what we need to be doing in the winter, because then that allows you to maximize your skill. It raises your skill level so that next summer you can play better golf, right? So now we're in our net, we're hitting balls, right? We worked on our programming, we got our block station, maybe we're doing some tempo stuff. We're filming our swing a lot. And I mean a lot. Like every 5 swings, like buy a tripod, they're like $3 on Amazon, and then sit it behind you, film it, look at it, draw a line, set it into Stock Shot Club, get the coach to give you like instantaneous feedback as to like what you need to do to get better, get your drills. Then you head over to your chipping. You do 10 perfect contacts, then 3 trajectory drill, then you work on tempo, and then you have your putting. So now go back onto Amazon, and I think it's like $24. Just buy like a little $24 8-foot putting mat, and then you would get your putting, because now when we're inside, right, we need to, with hitting a putt, we have to be able to start the ball on line, we have to have good speed, and we need to know how to read a green, and then we need to know how to like manage our emotions. That would be like your situational awareness. Well, if I'm inside, I can get really, really good at starting the ball on line, right? Like I don't have to be outside to do that. So that's where if I'm putting indoors, you would then go back into your programming. So you would check in the mirror like, okay, is my ball underneath my left eye for my putting? Is the putter underneath my nose? Are my shoulders square? Are my forearms and the shaft line up? Like, how's my posture? If you didn't know what you should do, once again, you could send in a video to Stock Shot Club, and then the coaches could tell you what you need to do, right? But then after you've done that programming, now you can set into your putting arc, and you would do your putting arc and your clips, right? And you would just sit there. I used to putt so well when Adler was a baby because I would sit with our apartment in Arizona, and I would sit there and I would watch NFL Sunday Ticket for hours while he would sit there like in his rocker on a Sunday, and I would hit putts for like 5-6 hours while like him and I would just hang out. And my putting stroke was fire because all I was doing, I was just sitting in our living room like hitting putts off this thing, and like working on my stroke, right? So you could do the putting arcs and clips, and then after that, you would say, okay, well, I got to see if I can start the ball online. So maybe you would get, you could set up some gates out in front of you. I really am a big fan of the Right Online, which you could get at thegolfroomproducts.com to like do it to where now you're doing something to like hit the ball through to make sure to check, am I starting the ball online? And then the next piece of advice, so you go, well, what about the speed? Well, the speed, I would take it right out of, I remember asking, I taught for 4 or 5 years, I taught a good friend of mine, his name was Michael Thompson on the PGA Tour. And Michael was the number one putter on the PGA Tour for, I think, like 2 or 3 years in a row, right? Guy could just putt the brains out of it. And I was helping him with his entire game for those 4 years, but mostly his golf swing and his putting. He was already a really good putter, so I was actually more inquisitive as to how he became a good putter. So I asked Michael, I go, hey, Mike, like, what did you do to become a really good putter? Right? Like, can you like reflect back on like your childhood and all those things? What was it that you were doing that made you a good putter? And he goes, well, when I was a kid, kind of like Michael Jordan, when he said that he used to make 100 free throws, Michael would say the same thing. He goes, when I was a kid, I used to have to make 100 3-footers in a row. I was like, okay, like people do that all the time. But he added this caveat. He goes, when I would make it the 100 3-footers, I also was focusing as a kid on the entry speed that the ball was falling into the hole, right? So it wasn't just like hitting 100 3-footers and making it. It's hitting the 3-footer, but then also seeing the velocity in which the ball is falling into the hole and trying to make that ball speed the same, which is kind of like the chipping of hitting it into a bucket and you keep hitting in the bucket, or like the free throws of trying to make it into the basket, right? So he was not only making the 3-footers, but then also working on the velocity in which the ball was falling into the hole. And I was like, wow, that's like next level, especially for a young kid, right? So that's something that you could do at the house, is work on that with your little putting green, or if it's even hitting it into a cup, right? Like meaning like a legit glass on your carpet, and seeing, can I make the ball fall into the hole at the same velocity every time? Because now you're working on speed. So now you're working on your line, you're working on your speed, and then you could once again use like an app like called Tempo in Motion, which is my favorite. You could also buy a product called by Blast Motion, which is that's the technology that could actually measure your tempo, right? And it's a pretty cheap little product. It's like $100, but you could do that, and now you have some ways that you're actually working on tempo, and you know if you're doing it right. So you can do all of that stuff, and like, if you did that, that would be like a pretty solid little practice plan for probably an hour and 25 to an hour and a half, right? And that's what I did at Seton Hall. And then I would go out and play when the spring season started, and I would do really good. And then there was also like the mental side of like I would build some affirmations and I would read books. And then there's the body side of like working out and doing all that stuff. But I want to encourage you that the winter time is the time that you actually are going to make the gains that you want for next year, right? So like, and that's with not just golf, like that's every sport, right? Think about it. Like like Ohio State, if they're playing football or any football team, like they get monumentally better or worse based upon what they do in the off season. But I hate the word off season. It's more of like the development season, right? Like that season that we're entering into here in Columbus, here in the fall, that's the season in which you really want to work on your game. And then when you go into the summer, you're working on your game, but you're working on it on a different way. You're working on like your routine and your mindset and course management and like your tension levels, right? You're doing things in your game in the summer for what we would call lessons of confidence, whereas in the wintertime, you're doing lessons of competence. So you're trying to make it so that your pattern is perfect. And then in the summer, you're trying to make it so that you can play up to your new level of skill. But in the winter, you're trying to raise up your level of skill, if that makes sense. So hopefully this gives you a little bit of a blueprint of like what I would do if I were you in the winter. But obviously, like if you're in Columbus, obviously come see us at the golf room, and you can mi casa su casa, right? So you can come practice at my house at the golf room and get better. But hopefully it kind of gives you a little bit of roadmap of what you should maybe do. And if you are confused, right, you know, we obviously can help build you a personalized practice plan at the Golf Room Everywhere, and kind of give you a coach that's remote anytime you want. So there's always that on the table if you guys would like. So thank you so much, and we'll see you guys back here for another episode. Hey guys, thank you so much for listening to the latest episode of Stock Shot Secrets. Now, as a listener of Stock Shot Secrets, I want to make sure that you have the opportunity to get better. So if you were to go to stockshotclub.com, I'm going to give you 7 days free access where you can send us your video and we will give you personalized individual attention as to what you need to do so that you can start building stock shots. So just go to stockshotclub.com and register there. We'll give you 7 days free where you can try it. And then if we like it, you can stay inside the Stock Shot Club where we can become your coach and walk with you for your entire journey. Thank you so much. And be sure to go visit stockshotclub.com.